How do backward pawns weaken your chess pawn structure? Imagine your pawn chain as a line of soldiers standing shoulder to shoulder. Now picture one soldier lagging behind, unable to catch up. That's what a backward pawn looks like on the board. It sits behind all the pawns of the same color on neighboring files and can't move forward safely. This creates a weak spot in your position that your opponent can target. A backward pawn is usually unsupported by other pawns because those nearby pawns have moved ahead or are gone. It often supports another pawn on an adjacent file but gets no help in return. The main problem is that the square directly in front of the backward pawn becomes a prime spot for your opponent to occupy. This square is called an outpost, and since your pawn can't move forward to challenge it, it becomes a stronghold for enemy pieces. Knights love these outposts because they can sit there comfortably and threaten your pieces or pawns. When a backward pawn sits on a half-open file, the danger increases. A half-open file is one where you have no pawn, but your opponent does. Enemy rooks can then slide along this open line and attack the backward pawn repeatedly. This makes defending it very difficult. Plus, the backward pawn blocks your own pieces from attacking or defending along that file. Rooks and queens can't easily reach the outpost square or attack enemy pieces there because the pawn blocks their line. This reduces your piece activity and limits your options. Having a backward pawn also means you are accepting a long-term weakness. Your opponent can plan to attack it or even try to capture it later. They might focus their pieces on this weak spot, forcing you into a defensive stance. But sometimes, creating a backward pawn can be part of a bigger plan. If you gain better control of the center or develop your pieces actively, the weakness might be offset by other advantages. For example, in the Sicilian defense, Black often ends up with a backward pawn on the d-file after playing e7-e5. Black then uses their dynamic piece play and central control to compensate for the weakness. Compared to other pawn weaknesses like isolated or doubled pawns, backward pawns are often more dangerous. Isolated pawns can sometimes be defended by pieces, and doubled pawns, though awkward, still maintain some structure. But backward pawns are different because they cannot be supported by other pawns and create a permanent outpost for your opponent. The severity of a backward pawn depends on the overall position. If your pieces are active and you have attacking chances, you might ignore the weakness. But if your pieces are passive and your opponent can focus on attacking the backward pawn without concern, the problem can become serious. When you see a backward pawn, your best move is to plan an attack against it or try to undermine it. If you create one yourself, make sure you have compensation in piece activity or other positional advantages. Balancing structural weaknesses with active play is a key part of good chess strategy.